My mother-in-law shouted straight into my face, "You're not part of this family. Get out." From that moment on, I knew it was time for me to take action. I've been with my husband since I was 19, back when I couldn't even cook a proper meal or grasp the complexities of family relationships. We grew up together, built a loving home from nothing, and weathered countless storms, some so tough it felt like we might never make it through. And yet, after everything, a single sentence from my mother in law was enough to shatter everything I believed in. I was never truly considered part of the family. The issue wasn't a moment of anger or frustration. In fact, my mother in law wasn't mad, nor did she say it to humiliate me. She was simply stating a fact in the most casual, matter of fact way. And that's what hurt the most. In their minds, I was never really one of them. It didn't matter how many years I spent in the kitchen preparing feast after feast, how many Christmases I hand wrapped every single gift, wrote every card. It didn't matter that I single handedly took care of my dying mother, two young children, and a husband recovering from a stroke, without any help from his family, who lived just 30 minutes away. When my husband had his stroke, I didn't leave him to fate. I learned how to give injections, do physical therapy, monitor his vitals, rushing between the hospital and home, only to return and hold our kids before the sun came up. When my mother was dying, I didn't expect them to cry or suffer for me. I just hoped for a check-in. A hot bowl of soup dropped off at the door. But no, silence. As if I didn't exist to them. Because in their eyes, they owed me nothing. To them, I was just an outsider fulfilling my duties. That truth hit me like a blow the day my mother-in-law told me I wasn't allowed to attend a family member's funeral because it was a gathering for family only. So, where were they when I needed a hug? Where were they when we cashed out our home equity to help them keep theirs, after poor financial decisions nearly cost them everything? Everything I ever did, it wasn't out of obligation. It was out of love, and I naively believed that love was mutual. But it turns out the affection I nurtured for 30 years was, in their eyes, nothing more than polite gestures from a familiar guest. I'm not telling this to get credit for being a good person. I'm telling it because I used to believe that if I just gave enough, did enough, eventually I'd be loved and accepted as one of their own. But I was wrong. Some doors never open, no matter how long you knock with the sincerest heart. And eventually you have to ask yourself, why am I still knocking? I used to think that after all these years of being a daughter-in-law, I'd earned at least some place in my husband's family's heart. But I was wrong, and that truth revealed itself in the most bare, brutal way when I was coldly and shamelessly excluded from a family event. It started when my husband's uncle, a gentle, kind man named Ned, passed away from COVID in 2022. The family decided to hold a small, intimate funeral, inviting only the closest relatives. That was fine. I completely understood. Grief, especially when fresh, often needs privacy. But it was the way my mother-in-law explained things that I'll never forget. Don't take it personally, sweetheart. Claire just wanted to invite family. Just family. That phrase sounded light, even casual, but it cut through me like a blade. I tried to tell myself she didn't mean it that way, but over the next 4 or 5 phone calls, she kept repeating it. Just family, a small meal for the family. It'll be so nice for the family to gather. No malice in her voice, no irritation, just a deeply held belief, repeated with thoughtless ease. I sat in silence after each call. I knew she didn't mean to trample over me, but she also didn't care enough to think her words might hurt someone. To her, I wasn't a daughter-in-law, wasn't a member, wasn't part of that proud little we she spoke of so fondly. I was the one who came along, a nameless shadow next to her son. I told my husband. As always, he listened, then gently suggested to his mother that she be more mindful of her words. But she did what she always does, talked over him, dismissed everything he said, and kept repeating there was nothing to be upset about, that I was being overly sensitive. What hurt most wasn't her indifference, it was his silence. I know my husband is soft spoken, that he struggles to push back, especially after the stroke that left him with emotional and communication challenges. But I still wished he'd look me in the eye and say, "You're right. You deserve to be respected." Instead, once again, I found myself carrying the weight, as always. What shattered me wasn't being left out of a funeral, it was the message behind the exclusion, that no matter how much I've done, how much I've given, how much I've sacrificed in their eyes, I was still not family. Still an appendix in their son's life, like a supporting character in a family movie where they were the stars. They later talked cheerfully about the lunch after the service, a cozy gathering where everyone in the family would share memories, mourn together, and find comfort. Meanwhile, I stayed home, like a housekeeper who had completed her duty and was then quietly dismissed when the family closed the doors for privacy. I didn't want a pity invitation. I just wanted to be recognized as part of the place where I'd spent the best years of my life. But when that never came, I started to understand. My presence was never something they truly welcomed. And once I realized that, everything began to change. After that ceremony, nothing was the same. I couldn't go on living as if I hadn't heard those words, as if I hadn't just been pushed out of a life I had helped build. I had hoped, endured, given. Now it was my turn to step back. Not to retaliate, but to protect what remained of my dignity. I sat down with Tom, my husband, the man I'd loved, cared for, and stood beside for over 3 decades. I looked at him, not with anger, but with a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. From now on, as I said, I'm no longer going to be the one maintaining the connection between you and your family. Cards, gifts, well wishes, birthday calls, that's your responsibility now. From here on, I'll only focus on my own side of the family. I didn't shout, I didn't blame, I didn't demand. I simply let go of the responsibilities I'd carried far too long, quietly and unconditionally. I knew this wouldn't be easy for Tom. He's an introvert, and after his stroke, he's had neurological challenges that make verbal memory and communication harder. But that doesn't mean I'll continue doing all the emotional labor for both of us. I didn't abandon him. On the contrary, I wrote down all the birthdays, anniversaries, and special dates from his side of the family and organized them into a clear list. I had only one request. If they see me as an outsider, then let me live that role, not with resentment, but with clarity. I also sent a letter to my in-laws, gentle but direct. In it, I explained that Tom and I had restructured how we manage family responsibilities. From now on, he would be the one to handle greetings, celebrations, and communication on his side. If anything was needed, they could reach out to him. There was no bitterness in my words, no harsh tone, but every sentence was shaped by 30 years of being overlooked and by one final moment of exclusion that woke me up. Tom's reaction wasn't anger, it was confusion. Maybe he had never realized just how much I'd been doing, or maybe he assumed that because I'm the wife, I'd just keep doing it forever without needing acknowledgement. At first, he tried to persuade me. "You're so good at it," he said, "and I'm so clumsy with that stuff." But I just smiled and gently replied, "Well then, I guess I'll have to learn how not to do it." It's been 3 years since I let go. Every holiday, birthday, or anniversary, when Tom turns to me and asks, "What are we doing for my parents?" I remind him, "That's up to you. That's your part now." At first, he hesitated, awkward, uncertain, then frustrated. Lately, he started sighing, even letting out little complaints like, "Aren't we past this yet? Are you really going to hold on to this forever?" Yes, I am still holding on to it. Because when your existence is denied, you don't just forgive and move on like nothing happened. Forgiveness can't be forced. And forgetting isn't a switch you can flip on and off at will. I don't hate anyone. I'm not stopping my husband or our kids from staying in touch with his parents. But I'm no longer going to pour my heart, time, and energy into a place that once looked me in the eye and told me I didn't belong. Tom started to complain more often. He didn't raise his voice, didn't get angry, just heavy sighs and a quiet, persistent look of disappointment. That was 3 years ago, he said over dinner one evening. Do you really have to hold on to it for this long? I put down my spoon and looked at him. In the soft golden kitchen light, I suddenly felt a distance between us that 30 years of marriage had never outlined as clearly as it did now. I'm not holding on to it, I said. I just don't want to keep investing in soil where I know I'll never grow roots. Tom went quiet. He's not a cruel man. He's a gentle husband who loves his family, but he grew up in a household where everything revolved around his mother's emotions, a woman no one dared to upset because her disapproval came either as loaded silence or a display of hurt meant to guilt everyone around her. For years, I handled that for him, like a survival instinct. And now that I've stepped away from being the buffer, all the turbulence has landed squarely on his shoulders. He doesn't think it's fair. And I wonder, since when did stepping away from an unpaid emotional role become a sin? He called his mother. I sat beside him, not interfering. I listened to her ramble on about family news, upcoming gatherings, repeating the same familiar lines. It's just family. Everyone's so close. I hope we can all be together. Not once did she mention me. Not once did she ask about me. Not a hint of remorse, whether accidental or out of conscience. After the call, Tom said nothing. I didn't ask. Between us stretched a silence that was no longer the peaceful quiet of two people who'd been together for decades. It was a kind of distance with a name, awakening. It seemed like only now he truly felt the weight of the indifference I'd endured for decades. One time, Tom looked at me and asked, "If my mom called you her daughter-in-law, if she acknowledged you as part of the family, would you come back?" I didn't answer right away. I froze, realizing I didn't need that anymore. I had crossed the point where their recognition held value. What I need now is inner peace, a life where I don't have to wrestle with exclusion or exhaust myself trying to belong. No, I said after a long pause. I won't go back. Not because I'm angry, but because I no longer feel the need to try. I spent my youth trying to belong somewhere that never opened its arms to me. Now I choose to turn toward those who are ready to open their hearts. I choose myself. I still cook good meals when Tom hosts gatherings. I still look neat, polite, presentable. But I no longer run the show. I no longer stand in the middle, managing emotions for both sides. And strangely enough, by stepping back, I finally saw the boundaries I had long crossed, the limits of kindness, the limits of endurance, the limits of myself. Sometimes I still catch Tom quietly watching me as I read in silence, or when I prepare meals for just the two of us, no longer setting aside portions for those on the other side. He doesn't say anything, but I can sense the silent question in his eyes. Will you ever forgive? I don't have a perfect answer for him. Because what I did wasn't an act of revenge, it was an act of awakening. Forgiveness to me is no longer a gift I give to others to make them feel better. It's a space I create for myself, to breathe, to heal, to live without resentment, but also without continuing to endure. I no longer wait for my mother-in-law to look at me and say, "You're my daughter-in-law." I don't expect a late embrace or a gentle apology after a moment of realization. Because I've come to understand some wounds don't bleed, but they can last a lifetime if we don't bandage them ourselves. As the holidays approach, Tom asks if I want to invite his family over for dinner. I smile and ask, "Do you want to host?" he stays silent. And I know that silence doesn't come from laziness or avoidance. It's because for the first time in his life, he has to face the long shadow of his mother on his own, without me as a buffer. I look at him with compassion and say, if you want, I'll help cook and get the house ready. But they're your guests. You invite them. This is your story. You stand for it. Then I step out of the kitchen, leaving him alone with his thoughts, just like I've had to face my own invisibility so many times in my life. I've started making time for things I never allowed myself before: painting, journaling, sipping coffee alone at my favorite cafe with no reason at all. I invite friends over for no special occasion, just because I enjoy their presence. I set boundaries for what I welcome and what I leave behind. And the strange thing is, I no longer feel lonely. I don't teach my children to pick sides. I teach them to recognize their own worth and know when to step back to protect their dignity. I don't badmouth their grandparents. I simply tell them the truth in a calm voice and let them decide for themselves what's right and wrong. I trust their character the same way I once had to trust my own, even when it was denied. Over the past 3 years, I've learned a simple but profound lesson. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't forgiving others, but knowing when to stop, when you've loved too much and not been loved in return. It's no longer trying to become someone else's idea of worthy. It's choosing yourself. If someone asked me today, do you still feel sad? I'd honestly say yes, sometimes. But if they asked, do you regret it? My answer would be never. So, because in the end, I chose the truth. And the truth, no matter how painful, is always the beginning of freedom. To those who've ever stayed silent to keep the peace, pushed themselves to exhaustion just to be acknowledged, and felt the heartbreak of realizing their devotion was taken for granted, you weren't wrong for loving too much. But you're also not wrong for deciding to stop. No one has the right to call you an outsider when you've lived as if you were part of their very being. And no one has the right to keep you in a relationship that makes you question your own worth. Family isn't a title that's handed out. It's recognition, it's compassion, it's the choice to reach out with the heart. If one day you find that you're always the one standing in the middle, connecting, patching things up, keeping the peace, remember this: you're allowed to step back. You're allowed to stop trying. Not because you're weak, but because you've been strong for far too long. Freedom doesn't come from being accepted. Freedom comes when you know you deserve more. That's the end of the story. If you found this meaningful, please leave a comment, like, share, or subscribe to support us and help us bring you more content like this. Thank you for listening. Take care and see you next time.